An example of the profile analysis that you will receive back from the Institute will be provided at the end of this session following a discussion of the variables assessed in the diagnostic survey. Welcome back to the lecture series on leadership and motivation. By now you've selected an employee to analyze their behavior and motivational factors associated with a targeted desired behavior or goal. You've now received a profile back from the survey that the employee completed and sent to the Institute. In the rest of this lecture series, we will discuss the various variables that appear on the profile analysis so that you, the leader, can more appropriately construct the proper action on your part to help and support the individual's achievement of this goal. The first set of variables that you received in the profile are general characteristics of the individual. Now, characteristics of the individual could be a broad topic. We could have captured a wide variety of things. We ended up choosing 4 characteristics that could be helpful to you in constructing leadership actions to support the individual's performance. These are fairly stable characteristics of the individual that appear in many different behaviors, are consistent across many different behaviors, but are particularly helpful in understanding why an individual would do or should do what you expect or desire them to do. The first characteristic of the individual that we would like to talk about are motivational traits. These are a subset of personality which generally represent tendencies that people have toward where they would focus their attentional resources. The next characteristic would be feedback propensities. And these are tendencies individuals have in regards to receiving feedback from their leader. The third is tolerance for ambiguity. This is another form of a personality trait that signals or represents the degree to which a person can deal with things that are or situations that are unclear or complex. And lastly, we will deal with the topic of self-esteem. This is a basic belief that people have about their own personal worth and value or importance, and we will look at it from a couple of different perspectives. Okay, come in. First, we will look at motivational traits. As I mentioned, motivational traits are a subset of personality which represents fairly stable tendencies that individuals have regarding where they would desire to direct their attentional resources and in what ways, which therefore makes them personality traits that are motivational focused. The first motivational trait that you have is called mastery. Mastery is simply the desire the individual has to develop competency. This is in contrast to the motivational trait competitive excellence. This is the desire the individual has to demonstrate competency. So where both of these are approach motivational traits, which means both of these traits, when an individual's high in both of these traits, they have a tendency to want to be in achievement settings. They desire to accomplish things, but for different reasons. One, to develop more competency, the other, to let others know the competencies they have. The third motivational trait is called worry. This is the desire to avoid being found incompetent. So this is an avoidance motivational trait that when an individual is high in this trait, they would simply not desire to put themselves in achievement settings. Now that you would know the motivational traits of your follower, what considerations should you as the leader take in how to productively help the individual given the various motivational traits they have? So let me share with you a few tips on what you, the leader, can do given the various motivational traits of the follower. First, if the individual is high in mastery, use the design characteristics model that we presented in the previous session. This focuses on individuals who have high growth needs, who want to do things that are important or that are purposeful or that are enjoyable, which is laid out in the design characteristics model. If an individual is high in competitive excellence, then you should use competitive strategies to motivate the individual. For instance, ranking all of the performance of all the employees, or creating contests that allow a person to win. So the notion of winning is highly motivational to those who are high in competitive excellence. If the individual is low in approach tendencies, then most likely you'll have to use transactional leadership. This simply means that the individual has very little desire to achieve for either purpose of developing or demonstrating competencies. And you may find that those individuals are best led through inducive techniques or intrinsic factors. If an individual is high in worry, then you should use encouragement and emphasize the value of the outcome if the individual is particularly high on approach or has intrinsic motivations already in them. If an individual is low in worry, the individual is not very susceptible to the leader's threats or warnings of failure. These individuals, we say, have ice water in their veins. It's important to understand at this point about motivational traits is that these are mutually exclusive. In other words, the individual can be high or low in mastery, high or low in competitive excellence, or high or low in worry, independent of their scores on the other measures. Now let's look at feedback propensities. Feedback propensities are simply the tendency that individuals have to welcome or to not welcome feedback from other people, or to rely heavily on their own ability to provide feedback to themselves in achievement settings. The first score you have on it, feedback propensities, measures their tendency to seek feedback from inside themselves. We call this internal propensity. And this is in contrast to the tendency to seek information about their performance from sources outside themselves, such as their leader or a coworker or possibly the task itself. Secondly, we want to know if the individual perceives that feedback from outside themselves or from other people is actually helpful in achieving at higher levels. Come back to me. The next characteristic of individuals that's helpful for us as leaders to know how to support or intervene on behalf of our followers for higher levels of performance is tolerance for ambiguity. Tolerance for ambiguity is the degree to which a person is comfortable with complexity or lack of clarity. The consideration of tolerance for ambiguity, characteristic of individuals as it relates to leaders, has to do with the way in which you can expect your follower to perform in ambiguous or unclear situations. So when the leader is high in tolerance for ambiguity and the follower is low in tolerance for ambiguity, the leader has to be particularly intentional about instructions regarding tasks. In other words, the leader is very comfortable with instructions being simple or unclear or not complete, but the follower is not. And this is a difficult situation for many leaders because a lot of leaders reach leadership positions because they can handle unclear and complex situations, but yet their employee may not be able to. And this combination is extraordinarily difficult in leadership. Instructions in this case should be very clear and simple, with examples provided to illustrate exactly what is expected. Lastly, we'll consider the characteristic of self-esteem. Self-esteem is a quite popular topic for organizational behavioral scholars because they believe that a person's view of their own importance or worth has a broad effect on many different behaviors and reactions to organizational stimulus. So let's look at the two variables that we capture regarding self-esteem.